They called themselves the Outlaws. Feared and untouchable, this mafia was a shadowy force of ex-military mercenaries, ruthless hitmen, and criminals whose loyalty was bought with blood. Their empire spread through the city like an infection: drugs, arms, and if the rumors were true, something far darker. For years, no one dared challenge them. People knew they were dangerous, but no one knew how dark their power really was. That was until Detective Alex Hayes started digging. For months, Alex had tracked the outlaws, piecing together scraps of information, finding holes in the city's darkest stories. They weren't just killing people, they were taking them, disappearing them without a trace. Families would vanish, their houses left untouched, food still warm on the table. No ransom calls, no messages, just gone. The deeper Alex dug, the more he realized he was onto something monstrous. And one night, after following a lead into an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, he came face to face with it. The building was silent, thick with the smell of decay. Alex crept through the shadows, his gun drawn, flashlight casting an eerie beam across the rotting wood and rusted metal. Every so often, he caught glimpses of strange symbols painted on the walls in a thick, sticky black substance. They looked like distorted faces, leering from the darkness. He tried to shake off the chill running down his spine, chalking it up to his nerves. Suddenly, he heard voices, low, murmuring chants. He edged closer, trying to keep his footsteps silent, until he peered around a corner into a massive, dimly lit room. In the center was a circle of people in dark suits, their heads bowed, hands raised, each of them murmuring the same words over and over. In the middle of the circle lay a man, bound and gagged, his face twisted in terror. Just as Alex processed what he was seeing, the men in suits stopped chanting and raised their heads. Their eyes were black, bottomless, pitch-dark pits. In unison, they began to whisper in a guttural voice that seemed to come from nowhere. Outlaws take, outlaws devour, outlaws rise. One of them raised a gleaming blade and, with a swift motion, brought it down. The man on the ground screamed, but it wasn't just the sound that horrified Alex. It was the way the shadows seemed to move, slithering along the floor like thick black smoke, coiling around the man, drinking in his pain, as if the darkness itself were alive. Without thinking, Alex stumbled backward and his foot knocked over a rusted can. The chanting stopped. Every head turned in his direction, black eyes glinting in the faint light. Before Alex could react, they were on him, moving faster than any human should, their pale hands reaching out with impossible strength. He fired his gun, hitting one of them square in the chest, but the man barely flinched. He broke free, adrenaline pounding through his veins, sprinting down the dark hallways, their footsteps pounding behind him. He made it to a side door, crashing through it into the cold night air, and didn't stop running until he was at his car. Behind him, the warehouse loomed, silent and dark, as if swallowing its secrets once more. Back at the station, Alex tried to report what he'd seen, but no one would believe him. And when he finally convinced his partner, Ray, to go back to the warehouse with him, it was empty. No bodies, no symbols, just an abandoned, decaying building. Ray chalked it up to stress, saying Alex had been working too hard. But Alex knew better. He'd seen the darkness that lived within the outlaws. It was something inhuman, a power older and far more dangerous than any mafia should possess. And now, it had seen him. Days passed, and Alex began to notice shadows where there shouldn't be any. Faces in the corners of his vision that vanished the moment he turned to look. Every night he woke to whispers filling his apartment, cold fingers brushing his skin. He was being hunted, and he knew there was only one way to stop it. He had to take down the outlaws before they came for him. He gathered every weapon he could, from guns to explosives, and went back to the warehouse alone. This time, he wasn't just going to observe. He was going to end them. The building was quiet, but Alex knew they were there. He kicked down the door, flashlight cutting through the darkness, his gun steady in his hand. He moved room by room, seeing nothing but dust and decay, until he reached the basement. There, standing in a half circle around a pit of black smoke, stood the outlaws, their leader at the center, a tall man with a scar slicing through one cheek, eyes as black as night. "Welcome, Detective Hayes," the leader said, his voice a soft, malevolent whisper. "We've been waiting for you." Before Alex could respond, the shadows surged from the pit, coiling around his arms, pulling him forward. He fought, struggling against the impossible force, firing his gun wildly, but the bullets had no effect. The darkness was alive, hungry, wrapping around him like thick, icy chains. He stared into the leader's eyes as the man leaned close, a twisted smile on his face. "You think you understand power," he whispered. "You have no idea." With a final burst of strength, Alex reached into his coat, pulling a grenade pin and tossing it into the darkness. The explosion ripped through the basement, and the last thing he saw was the flash of light, the shadows twisting and screaming as they disintegrated into smoke. The building burned to the ground that night, taking Alex and the outlaws with it. The city moved on, and in time, people forgot about the fire. But on certain nights, near the ruins of the old warehouse, some say you can still hear the whispers. The outlaws weren't just a mafia, they were something far darker. And though they were gone, their hunger lingered, waiting in the shadows for someone else foolish enough to seek them out.